I really don't like that kind of philosophy. I really like, I really like to put time and love in something that I'm making. So I like, I have no problem spending days going into details. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at a bunch of paintings you have been doing fast, and like maybe two paintings that you really polished, something is gonna stay over the years and it's gonna stay in people's mind. And most of the time, it's gonna be something that you really took the time to finish. It's also like that you took time to plan. You took time during the process. You took time to finish it. Sometimes you think it's finished. You want to post it online, but like save it for a couple of days and look at it again a couple of days after, and maybe you'll find other things that you can improve. And I think it's something that I think it's important to go towards.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast. And I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, senior concept artist Romain Jouandeau. Vastly experienced in the industry, Romain has lent his brilliant creative talents to the likes of Quantic Dream, Sucker Punch Productions, is currently at Naughty Dog, and has just seen the release of his Learn Squared course, Visual Storytelling, which is out now. In this episode, you'll enjoy some refreshing insights from Romain, where we discover how he handles his work-life balance, his creative philosophy, inspirations, what Purpura Petriosa is, and a deeper look into his Learn Squared course. There are some absolute gems in this episode. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Romain Jouandeau. Welcome, Romain.
Hi.
Excuse me. Just a quick disclaimer before we begin. I've just recovered from a cold, so everybody might enjoy my ambient background coughing, so that's something to look forward to, but I'll try and keep that to a minimum. But first and foremost, super excited to have you on. I guess like the first thing we can shout about is the fact that not only you're a badass artist, but you're also part of the Learn Squared family as an instructor with your, in my opinion, unbiased opinion, of course, excellent visual storytelling course. Firstly, congratulations on that. First, how does that feel having that course out? And I guess once we get that out of the way, we can jump right into all the good stuff about the course and how it was to make it, and what you'd like to achieve and so on. But first and foremost, what was the journey like to create that amazing course?
Well, thanks for the kind words. It feels great that it's finally done, because it took me a few months to actually make, because I started in January. Mm-hmm. So it's been like a long journey. But yeah, I'm super happy that it's finally done and that people can now enjoy it. And I'm also really happy to have done that with you guys.
Yeah, I like. It's just the obviously the content itself is amazing. Like, this is me putting my artist hat on, and like, I don't know, I speak for a lot of other artists either in my position, or maybe people starting out, or just even people more experienced than me. When we all, especially like maybe even just concept artists more specifically as well, but obviously this applies to a wide range of artists, is that when we kind of create our, I guess, the things that we create, there's always that sense of something bigger that kind of that swims in your brain when you're creating these things, whether we tell people or not. It's always there and happening. And I guess in some instances for myself, there's some of the things that maybe the idea was more grand than what my skill set could perhaps help me realize. Yet after like seeing the course, watching it all the way through, and all the knowledge that's bestowed upon it, seeing like how you get your obviously imagery created and how you get your ideas out and how you turn it into a story, straight away there's so many ideas and stories that I've had like kind of put in the locker, thinking, maybe one day when skills get to a certain level, I can do that. Straight away, those are out the locker, ready, put into the oven, so to speak. All thanks to the course. So, like, how has that been for you? Like, has that always been the case for you, where you've always built your work around a story, or is that something that kind of you've developed over time?
I mean, like you said, I think we all do, right? Like when you want to do an image for yourself, you kind of have to tell yourself a story a little bit to make something interesting. So I haven't always done like such a written story before, because those images are also parts of a bigger project.
Mhm.
So I haven't always done that. Sometimes it's more simple, but I think it's definitely nice to have something in your mind that is pretty deep, to because it's going to make your images more interesting, and it's also, I think, more motivating, right? Because
Mhm.
if you just make personal images just for the sake of it, just to like progress or learn new techniques, I think it's going to lack something, right? It's not going to be as original or as interesting. So I think it's really, and it's also more fun, right?
Mhm.
To have to tell ourselves stories.
Totally. I mean, like, I guess that's probably the thing that drives a lot of people is something that they've either wanted to explore, most likely from a young age, or had been inspired by something and they wanted to do their own like take on that maybe or own interpretation.
Hmm.
And I guess like when you head into the professional world, that kind of maybe gets that energy gets obviously put into client work or projects and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing because, of course, that kind of, I guess, energy and that thought process can also give you an edge when you're creating for clients. Um,
Right.
but like, was there a specific moment for yourself when you thought, all right, okay, and this might obviously be linked to the biggest world that you're building with what the images that you made for the course are part of. But was there like a triggering moment that you said to yourself, okay, that I need to start building stories or learning how to, I guess, paint my stories, rather than, I guess, just have them as an idea that's just swimming around in our brains and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think it's something that I've been doing for a long time. Like even when I was in school, so I've always had like little side projects and things going on. I feel like I don't always like, I've had projects before that I haven't really worked
Mm.
towards until this one. Um, but I've always kind of done that, and so that project called Purpura Petriosa, I think I started actually thinking about it maybe like 5 years ago or
Mm-hmm.
something. And at first I was just like, writing ideas or doing little sketches. I had like a general idea
Mm.
of it, but it wasn't really precise. And, as I was working on other projects, as I was actually making money, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a lot of time for it. So I was just, every time I had an hour or every time I had an idea and I was feeling inspired, I would just take my sketchbook and write ideas down. That way, I would not forget things, because also like when you have ideas like that, it's easy to just like after a month you completely forgot what you had in mind. So I think it's really important to write it down, sketch ideas, and that way, even if it's going very slow, years after years, months after months, years after years, it narrows it down to something that is a little more fleshed out. And so,
Mm.
I don't know what I'm going to be doing with that project. For now, it's just a fun project. It's just something that I do for myself. But I've been doing it for a while, and so I feel like now it's getting a little more. It's getting somewhere. I feel like.
Mm. Again, I think that's like it's a beautiful thing to hear because it's something that you kind of done not so much on the side in the terms of where that it's that takes away from the work that you put on there, but it's almost like this is I guess bonus stuff that you've been doing
Mhm.
and from what that bonus initially thing was, like it just shows the potential that anything that any of us may be doing on the side where it can lead to. And even now, like, you know, from a viewer looking into it, I'd say that the body of work that you've built so far is awesome. It looks great. And the fact that you said it's spanned 5 years, it doesn't look, and I mean, this is a compliment, it doesn't look like there's a gap in 5 years almost. It's like the
Well,
quality
dude,
of
there
it.
is.
Oh, okay,
No,
maybe.
it's nice to hear, but there is definitely a gap. Yeah.
Oh, but I guess in the other sense, then in terms of like the world that you're building and how it looks, and there's a consistency in that at least. Then maybe, of
Hmm.
course, like technique is always improving, and tools that come into play, and maybe the way you make obviously that's 100% must have changed in the last 5 years or so. But I guess what I'm trying to get is more like the potency of the world you're building in terms of obviously we've spoken behind the scenes on this, and obviously I know a fair bit more to what's happening in this particular world, and it totally shows from whatever you started doing a bunch of years ago to now, and as for me to see that, that's quite inspiring as well. But I just want to get at the fact that obviously whilst this has been happening, you've been building a career, you've been obviously heavily engaging in your career and working on amazing projects and creating amazing work to do so. Um, has like what kind of, I guess, creative are you in the sense? How do you juggle these things? Are you someone who's quite structured and organized, and you, like you mentioned, when you find some time, you go ahead and create? Is that something that you plan, or is it all just about feeling, and whatever you're feeling, you go ahead and do that? And obviously, everything that comes out of that is a I guess a direct consequence of that kind of energy. Where do you sit up on that?
That's a good question. I think it actually changed a little bit over the last few years, where I used to work maybe a little more than I do now. So I would be like, okay, I'm going to do my professional work from uh, this time in the morning to this time in the afternoon, and then maybe I'll switch and put an hour or two towards my personal project or something else, studies, whatever, or freelance project, whatever. I used to be a little more regimented, I guess, but
Mm,
I kind of grew out of that, where I feel like now I really try to work less. So I don't plan necessarily like, okay, next week I'm going to be working on this and the week after working on that.
mm,
It's like now it's more like by burst. I feel like, okay, maybe now it's a little more calm at work. So and I feel like I'm inspired and I have creative energy. So maybe I'm going to use that to crunch a little bit of extra work for my personal project. But it's not like, yeah, I basically really try to work less now. So I'm not as, I don't have like a calendar with like
mm.
all the things I need to do and stuff. Not anymore.
And I'm actually quite excuse me, I'm actually quite glad to hear that, in a sense, not because you're making less art. Of course we want to see you make more art because it's good to see, but obviously that's a selfish thing to say. But more so like the fact that in terms of seeing a career and longevity, and just seeing how like elite artists operate and how they evolve. Like, it's interesting you say that you grew out of being like regimented. Sometimes, like for me, just from a personal experience, like being regimented or scheduling or planning, like I actually think I have something missing in my brain for that, because I do struggle with that sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, and like you mentioned, like working in bursts and stuff, that completely resonates with me, because that's probably how best I tend to create. Obviously there's drawbacks if it doesn't work out, because when you got deadlines and clients needs to meet, it can, at least in my sense, it can sometimes get quite um stressful. But I guess it's part and parcel of just the kind of the the industry that we're in. But in terms of like how you mentioned that you're kind of like doing, well, I guess you could say you're doing less in terms of like, I guess, actual output. But I'm pretty sure that when you're doing less, you find when you get back to art, is your art better?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I want to say that I'm not a freelance, so like I have my work to do every
Mm,
day. So like it's easier for me to not be planning, because it's not like I had a bunch of different projects to do, and it's not like if my professional life was a mess, because it's like I just have one thing to do. I just
right.
have my work at Naughty Dog, and then whenever I have extra time or extra energy, I can do my personal project. So in that
Mm.
sense, it's a little easier than for you. Um, and sorry, what was your question?
Um, yeah, just about like when you kind of like say, as you mentioned, that you're not working as much or putting that much out now, you haven't obviously time
Oh,
out and breaks
that's
and
right.
stuff. Like how is that affecting your art when you get back to art?
Yeah, so I feel like, you have, I mean, for me at least, that's how I work. Like I have that much creative energy every day or every week,
Mhm.
and I really try to use it. I don't know what's the English word for it, but I try to not overuse it, because it's like once it's gone, it's gone.
Mhm.
So like, for example, like when I work on at Nutty Dog, for example, it's the end of the day, right? I've done my 8 hours, and I still feel inspired. Like I'm having fun on the painting, and I feel like it's going somewhere. I stop. If my day is over, I stop and I keep the juice for
Mm.
tomorrow, because when I will wake up the day after, I'll still have that like scratch. Like I'll still want to get back to my painting, and so I'll get back to it like
Right.
rested and with a lot of energy. Whereas if I work 4 extra hours that day, then like I'm gonna finish working, go straight to bed, and the day after I'm gonna be like feeling down or whatever. Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna have it. So I think it's really important to like not push yourself too much, and on the long run, I think it works better.
And is that something you've learned the hard way?
Yeah, but I think it's also something that when you're younger and at the beginning of your career, you can sort of do, like, because you have more energy and you're more eager to do all the work, because
Mm.
you're super hungry, and so you really go for it. I mean, I did. I think we all do.
Yeah.
But then as the years pass, you're like, it's you. I mean, I think life is not about work.
Mhm.
I like to do a lot of other things, and so I really try uh, to manage it. I don't want work to basically take control of my life. So
Mm.
yeah, I really try to be mindful about this.
That's brilliant to hear. Not only because I guess that's kind of what a lot of people always say about finding the balance.
Mhm.
And I guess it's maybe difficult in a creative sense because, like you mentioned, you get that buzz when you're creating, and if things are going well, you kind of want to create more and more. But then when you realize, we're only mortal, things like you mentioned, like you're aware of the fact that if you go over a certain amount of time, it's gonna knock onto the next day, and that obviously can lead to a worse output in that sense. So kind of managing that is super super key, and obviously, like you mentioned, I guess when we're younger, it's easy to not manage that because obviously, just that buzz can be high, or maybe you think
Mhm.
putting that extra effort in is what's going to help a project that maybe you just need to take a step back from. Um, but it's like also it's good to see, like I mentioned before about the balance side of things. Um, was there any specific thing that had happened, or was it like a bunch of things that had made you kind of lead to that conclusion? Because sometimes it can be maybe one thing, or maybe it's just a bunch of things, and I guess you kind of grow into that maybe. How did it work out for you in that sense?
Yeah, so I remember a few years ago, like I think actually when I started at Circle Punch, I was still doing like a bunch of freelance on the side, mainly to save money. So like
Mm-hmm.
I remember working so during the day, my regular work, and then working evenings and weekends on freelance projects and stuff that were sometimes not super interesting. It was just paying well, so I was just doing
Right.
it. But like after a few months, a few years, I think I've done that for a couple of years. I was just like kind of drained out, and like I didn't burn out because I think I stopped before, but I felt it coming.
Mm.
And it made me realize, like, I mean, okay, yeah, you're making a bit of extra money, and you can save that, but your life kind of sucks because all
Mm.
you do is sitting in front of a screen, and I was not really enjoying it. And so like, having a job, like, it's like, how much do you need? Like,
Mm.
when is enough? Because I was here already doing it for money. And so that's kind of like, I decided to not take freelance anymore. And also, it would just allow me to work on my own things, even though
Mm.
it's not making anything. It's making me happy. So, yeah, it's, it was pretty cool to like be able to say no. And
Mm.
now I say no to pretty much everything.
And how does that make you feel? Say no.
It's hard to say
Right.
sometimes, but once you did, you just feel at peace, because you're like, you
Right.
don't have that thing in the back of your mind where you're like, because yeah, freelance is often like tight deadlines, and you're already busy during the day doing your regular job. So it's just like, it was so much stress, man. Like, and I mean, it's definitely not worth it, I think. So I think, I think again, when you're at the beginning of your career, it's different. Like, I think it's kind of nice to like really go for it and crunch a little bit. But I don't think it's sustainable to do for a long time, you know. And even more if you have people around you that need you, like it's also important.
Yeah, I guess unless you're like you're a superhuman who can handle all of that. But I think
Hmm.
it is quite interesting what you mentioned there. It's a case of it's a conclusion that you came to after experiencing it, as opposed to something that you just didn't know much about, but you decided not to do it. So it's kind of like you kind of need to maybe sometimes have that experience, just a taster even sometimes, to see what's right, what's wrong for you. Or maybe it's not even about right or wrong. It's just a case of what's important for me at this point in time in my life.
Right.
And
And also like, for some people, work is their life. So like, if that's
mhm.
the case, like, everyone is different, but yeah, that's for me.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And it's almost a case of just kind of really like almost like I said you mentioned about excuse me. About when you're younger. Sorry, I'm just getting some water.
Yeah, 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 go ahead.
I thought he had gone, but it's come back. But no, it's um like when you're younger, I guess there's sometimes that insecurity of thinking I'm not going to get any work. I shouldn't say no because I've dreamt for this for so long. I've worked so hard to get there. Like, why would I say no? But it's all, and obviously, a lot of artists have mentioned that also, especially ones like yourselves that have had experience and had some decent mileage in the industry, to say that that's quite, I guess, a thing that people tend to conclude on, saying that it's okay to say no and it doesn't necessarily kill your career. And that's maybe being a bit dramatic with my wording there, but and just from my experience of when I was starting out, just thinking that like I'm never gonna get this opportunity, I have to take everything that comes my way. Like you start realizing later on that no, you don't need to do that, and maybe if you were not doing that and you were taking everything, you're going to get burnt out to the point where maybe you actually can't even work anymore because something snaps or something breaks and you gotta have to wait a long time to get it healed, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, it's kind of like how our society works, where we have that sort of bulimia, right? Where we just want more and
Mm-hmm.
more and more. And, you want to impress people, saying like, yeah, you worked for this, you did that
Yeah.
project. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's I mean, it doesn't matter so much. Like, what matters is to have time for yourself and be happy, So it sounds so cliche what I'm saying, but I think a lot of people forget that, and there is that sort of competition where you want to be working on the best projects all
Mm-hmm.
the time, but you can't do it all. And sometimes, yeah, I think it's better to prioritize quality over quantity. So like, doing a bunch of stuff halfway through is not even worth it. So
And like it's quite interesting as well, like the I guess the contrast in that sense, because you are someone who has and still does work on big projects. And I think sometimes when you do say something like you mentioned, obviously a cliche there. I guess there's a reason why they are a cliche, because there's a truth in all of them, and
mhm.
you can tell when you're mentioning it, it comes from a genuine place of experience and obviously something that you've discovered and embraced, as opposed to like maybe where the core cliches when you just kind of repeat a quote kind of thing. Um, but like a couple of things I want to get to. But first, what I want to jump on is working for the kind of the studios and the clients that you've had, and the projects that you've had, and how. Firstly, how did that happen, and how has that helped you grow as an artist?
um, so all the studios that I worked for, like, I think the thing I got out of it that is the most important is the people I got to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also like sort of how I selected the places I wanted to work for, because like, it's not just the name of the place, it's also like who is working there
Mm-hmm.
and what am I going to be able to get out of it.
Sick.
So this, and I think it goes back to all the way to when I worked at Quantic Dream in Paris. Like you get to learn a ton from the people you work with. So I think it's really something that that is really important when you
Mm.
pick a place that you're going to work at.
And like obviously you mentioned there, selecting people. Like, so did you do a lot of research before, I guess, like we applied to these studios, or did sometimes were you approached on these projects? Like, how did you get these opportunities?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely not a big gamer, so it's not like I have a lot of studios and a lot of games I like where I would like to work. So
Mhm.
if a studio does something that I really like, and I know the work of the people who work there, then I would definitely work there because I'm looking to to be a part of a project where there is like some sort of how do you call that? Um, I don't know how to call that in English. Uh, is it emulation? Is it an English word?
Yeah,
Like
like emulate, like you kind of want to,
exactly, yeah.
yeah,
You get
yeah,
inspired by each other, and it's not
yes,
like not just concept artists too. It's also like people working in other departments. Like for example, at Naughty Dog, it's I don't do characters, but I'm so impressed with what they do. The character team there it kind of like puts the bar so high
mm,
for you that you owe it to yourself and to them to like produce the best work you can, right?
yeah.
So like if you work with people who are inspiring you, it's gonna I mean if you have self-respect, it's gonna push you to work better.
Mhm. And I think it's awesome that you mentioned different departments and disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
because for me that's something that has always been important. Not just important in the sense of like in a deliberate way, but it's always fascinated me, like seeing what the other pieces in the bigger machine are doing, to see, like, because then you realize, okay, if that falls apart, then everything else kind of falls apart. So
Yeah.
like just to see how everything works. So it's just awesome to see that, because um not to make like a criticism, but I guess a lot of times maybe, and maybe it's quite easy to do so, because it can get quite tough sometimes when you're trying to perfect your craft, but you kind of get stuck in your own little lane and think that that's where it's at and that's kind of what you need. But kind of like like you've done, is like kind of broaden your horizons a little bit, widen that scope and see what's actually happening, and then like you mentioned, you get inspired in ways that perhaps if you'd stuck to your own lane, you'd never get that kind of angle of inspiration. Is that something you've always done?
Yeah, and I think that's also why I've been sort of navigating between studios since I started working. I've never stayed. I think the longest I've stayed at a studio was Sucker Punch, and I stayed for like a little under 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to. I mean, it's important. I'm not saying it is for everyone, but for me, I felt like I needed to go somewhere else uh, because I wanted to like be surrounded by something I didn't know again.
Mm-hmm.
So like because every time you start a new job, it's kind of crushes you at first. You're like the
Mm-hmm.
first few months you're lost, and you need to like I don't know how to say, but like you need to like relearn your job almost every time.
Right,
'Cause
right.
even though you feel like technically you're fine, you still have to learn a new style. You have to learn like you have to know new people. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everything is new, so it's like usually during that period you learn a lot during those few months.
Sick.
It kind of throws you off. So like it's throws you off of your comfort zone basically. So this is something I've tried to do um, every time after a few years, even though it's not pleasant because it can be stressful
Mm-hmm.
and it's definitely not easy. But I think once you pass it, it's you usually progress and level up.
That's super inspiring to hear, because, um, like it's quite easy to fall in that trap of, you experience something like maybe that's a bit turbulent or a bit uncomfortable, like you mentioned
Mhm.
about starting to a new place, and then you immediately put that in the category of that's a negative experience. Let's not do it again. But like clearly you've analyzed how that has actually helped you grow in that sense, and then to actually repeat it. That's awesome to hear and see, because I guess quite often a lot of us maybe just tend to avoid a similar situation again. Not necessarily like overly negative in a bad way, but like we tend to go for the path of least resistance sometimes, and
Yeah,
sometimes going for that resistance, especially when you're working out, you're supposed to like kind of increase your weight every time when you get to a comfort level,
exactly.
just so you can improve. So it makes no difference why that can't apply to art and stuff. Um, and I guess you kind of answered my next question a little bit already, but obviously you mentioned about changing and wanting to change and try different things, and you've moved countries, obviously since your place of birth. I guess that was quite a deliberate thing as well. Whilst you chose your studios, or was that kind of something that came along with? Was that more like, I guess, where I wanted to work and where they were located was kind of did it? It's where it kind of ended up being, or was that quite deliberate as well? Like you wanted to maybe um live outside of your hometown.
So yeah, at some point, like I felt like I wanted to live somewhere else because I was, lived in Paris for a few years, for quite a few years, like almost 8 years, I think, and I'm like sick of it. But like I ended up moving to the US not for work; it was for personal life
Mm-hmm.
reasons. I originally wanted to go to Canada, so it's like
Right.
it's same area sort of. Um, but yeah, then I ended up working at Sucker Punch because I remember not wanting to go to to California. So I ended up at Sucker Punch because I mean I absolutely love the area, the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So I was quite sad to leave the place to come to Naughty Dog, but I really enjoy being here now. But yeah, it's I think it was really like sort of life changing
Mm-hmm.
to move to the US just because I'm really inspired by nature in general, and it's just like it's bananas here. It's crazy. So I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've never been there, but from people I've spoken to, and just like obviously you can just see, just if you open an atlas, for example, or watch National Geographic or something, like the
Mhm.
diversity of the landscapes and the climates and all that kind of stuff out there. And I guess like as an artist, that's just super inspiring anyway, because you get all this reference, all this wild like information
Right.
that you can get. But even in just generally like say not for non-creative people, just being around nature and just even like changing scenery sometimes is just it. I can't put into words what it actually does. We all say things like it's calming, it's inspiring, etc., etc. But I think it's way deeper than that, and that's the kind of best word we can find. But obviously that brings me to I guess um your other Instagram profile. Is it French Sasquatch?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
it.
yeah? Got it. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so firstly, that's I actually thought some of them were renders, but it's clearly your photography. Um, some super dope photography, and not just only that, I guess the lens that you like it's your lens, what you see in terms of the environment, how you capture it. And obviously you've already alluded to it so far, like nature's important to you and just exploring. But I'd love to know more about that journey. Like who is French Sasquatch?
So it's funny because I've always loved nature and spending time in nature. But when I was in France, living in Paris, it's like nature is really far. It's like it's even hard to find a tree there. So it's
Wow.
I guess it's something I've been missing for many years, and maybe something that one of the reason that pushed me out of France and out of Paris. Even though there are some beautiful places in France, but I guess when I started to settle in the US, like I realized like how gorgeous the country is and
Mm-hmm.
how like it's. I mean, you have a lot of gorgeous places in the world, but like in the US, like the special thing about it is that it's very untouched because the country is super large, and so there are a lot of places where there are no human presence at all. It's very
Mm-hmm.
preserved, and it's something that is really hard to find in Europe. And so when I started to, do more and more hiking, I remember I had a pretty shitty camera, and I would be very frustrated with what I would bring back because the photos were shit. And so I started to, invest a little more into that and go more and more, and really really fell in love with photography. So it's I think I like it almost as much as concept art now.
Nice.
So I really want to do a lot more with that.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the creative stuff is just like I guess one. strand on like the wider spectrum of all the other things that are out there. And it's quite interesting that how long like it takes to, or how much energy it takes to dedicate yourself onto one specific thing. And if you can do more than one, obviously they naturally feed into each other, but it's still quite rewarding that you can kind of get that same feeling or an equal feeling, like you just mentioned, from one discipline to the other.
Yeah,
Like
and they kind of
yeah,
feed into each other too, which is nice. You know, I feel like sometimes when I do photography, it's almost like I'm still training my eye. So you know,
not 100%. Like
yeah,
even like just looking at your photography, it's almost like it's like real life Blender. Like you kind of just staging it. You got your little 3D asset there, but obviously it's not an asset. It's real life. But you can clearly see like how um you maybe or anybody else might want to change that into whatever it might be. But I guess it's only natural that's the case because that's something that you do as a profession, as a career, and obviously as a passion. And to combine that with photography, which is kind of like, it's like it's something that I don't do heavily, but like yourself, it's something that once you kind of get the bug, you can't ever shake it, and it's something that you
right.
always like you look forward to. Whereas before, you might want to walk through maybe even the same place every day, but when you start looking at it through the eye of a photographer who wants to capture something, it looks completely different. And
Yeah,
like,
and I would say, I'm sorry, I'm cutting
no, no,
you
no, of
out, but
course, no, please.
I would say that also when I started doing photography, I started to hike in a different way. And because I would go hiking mostly alone, and when
Mm.
you're by yourself, you just like hike fast and you barely look around. I mean, you do, but you don't stop to really appreciate it.
Yeah,
But when I started to really get a little more serious with photography, like I would take twice the time to do a hike than I would
sick.
before, and you know, because it would stop, you know, forever. Like sometimes I have a tripod and stuff, and so it takes forever. But you really get to like take it in a lot more.
Mm.
So it's kind of like you know, when people say they really like to hunt because they like to be in nature and
Hmm.
like so I think it's kind of like the same thing. You really share, like you're not just walking outside. You're like doing something with nature
Hmm.
without killing anything. So
Mm.
it's kind of nice. But I think it's the same kind of thing. I think.
No, for sure. And yeah, that kind of answers one of my next questions was going to be was like how has photography affected, I guess, the nature side of things, the hiking side of things? I should just answer that because it literally doubled your change your experience completely, like how you would hike. Um, but like for somebody who maybe like hasn't done that but is considering doing that, do you have any tips for a beginner of how to maybe approach that, or maybe ways to like not get your foot caught in a bear trap or something? Like any kind of things, any adventures you've had along the way that are worth telling in terms of a story to the grandkids, maybe?
I think like the thing is like a lot of the time I have people asking me what camera I use, what lens I
Right.
use. But I think the most important thing is the places you go to.
Uh-huh.
So like I think the advice I could give is like to actually put the efforts to make the trip to go somewhere like special, you know, like actually walk miles, actually, you know, like not go to a random place. And I think like you see a photo that's really cool, but like you don't see like the hours it took to go to
Mm,
that place to hike, like to hike in the rain and like carry all the gear. It's like you can't really be lazy, yeah, if you want to do that. So
mm.
it's you kind of have to, yeah, put yourself out there.
That reminds me of like a lot of the wildlife documentaries, like the Planet Earth ones that come on the BBC. They always have that like 10-minute bit at the end where they show how an
Yeah,
episode is made, and in some cases, the the cameraman or the camera woman or the photographer, whoever it was like staked out there for like close to a year in some cases to get that one shot.
yeah,
And
it's crazy.
you just can't like it really opens your eyes. Like it's quite we quickly get naive on things and think, oh yeah, that just click and go and it looks all cool when it's all finished and
Hmm.
polished. But like you mentioned, and I guess it's a bit like art as well. Like a lot of us always look at the finished image first, and we enjoy it and we move on. Sometimes we think a little bit deeper and thinking, oh, how was this made? And maybe that's more like the professional or the hobbyist who wants to figure that out. But we rarely ever see, I guess, the blood, sweat, and tears and actual journey it took to get to that particular image. And I guess it's the same thing, like you mentioned, with photography as well, and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
trips you have planned for, I guess, in the near future that potentially could lead to some cool photographs from you?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, I'm going to a place called Cradle Lake next week. I'm going to see a couple of friends near Portland, and yeah, we were planning a trip to Cradle Lake. It's like a giant crater in Oregon. It's a
Mm,
national park.
sick.
It looks pretty cool, so I'm pretty excited about this.
And like, how much? Like, how have you kind of like? I guess the probably the answer is no. But how much have you covered of America so far? Like, have you been to all the places you want to be so far?
Dude, like I haven't seen like I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
Like I mean, I've seen a bunch of places, but it's so big.
Mm,
I think so when I was living in Seattle, I would hike a lot more than here actually, just because it's paradise for that over there.
hmm.
So I think I've traveled in Washington State quite a bunch. I've seen a lot there, even though it's so huge. Just
Mm,
I would still have so much to discover. But basically, I've been to a bunch of places on the West Coast. That's what I know the most, like Washington State, Oregon, and
hmm.
California, which are amazing. I mean, it's I think it's one of the gem of the US. So,
Mm,
but there are many other places that I would like to check out for sure. Yeah, it's the country is huge, so
yeah.
you can spend a lifetime just visiting it.
Wow. And this is just me nerding out or wanting to know a bit more about, I guess, this kind of world. I guess like this kind of space.
Mhm.
Excuse me, this kind of creative space. Like how many pictures do you end up taking on a quote unquote average? Like,
Huh? I don't know. I mean, thousands, obviously, but I'm not sure. Like when I do, for example, when I do a photo pack, you know, because I sometimes if I really spend a day hiking somewhere, I'll just take a ton of photos and release a photo pack that I
mhm,
can use and that I can sell. And so, like for example, if I end up with 400 photos in the pack, I probably took 1,000. But when you see like, but those photos are references, right? They're not
mm,
like actual pieces of art. So
mm,
if I do like one of the photo that you see on my Instagram, like maybe for one photo that you see, there's probably like 100 that you don't, you know.
right,
So
right. That's actually cool to hear as well. Like the fact that metaphorically speaking, you got a lens for reference, like for actual your profession, and then a
yeah,
lens for like the actual art and print and stuff. Um, like is that something that you kind of do automatically, or is that something again that you kind of when you reach a location, you think, okay, this is going to be perfect for this, and do you switch gears? Like, is it intentional, or is it all happen organically?
yeah, it's definitely intentional because you don't like I don't shoot the same way if I try to shoot
Mm,
references or like pretty pictures because references you're gonna need like texture of like that trunk and like you know it's gonna be boring photography but so it's like basically walking along the trail and shooting everything you see um so it's I don't do it every time because you know 4 hours hike is gonna turn into eight so it takes a long time
and
but it's also something I remember picking up photography at the beginning
mhm,
sort of like for that reason because I wanted to shoot
mm.
my own references.
Was that because you weren't getting references you wanted? Like you wanted more options?
Yeah, and also like just because I mean it was so gorgeous. Like
Mm,
some of the places I was into, I was like, man, I could really use that tree there. It's like it's perfect, you know.
yeah.
And is I couldn't do it. It was like an okay camera. You need like something a little better. So I kind of started doing it for myself, and then yeah, started to do it a little more seriously.
And keeping it on more the geeky technical stuff. A few of local places I've been again, just like taking the family out for walks and stuff.
Right.
It's been handy having my phone on me because you obviously can take like photogrammetry now, like on your phone, like doing scans and stuff. Is that something you tend to do much as well? Because I can imagine the places you've been to, some of the actual objects, like having that in a 3D space must be like just you probably seen some super awesome stuff.
Yeah, so I haven't done it, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot
Mhm.
because yeah, you're right. It's I feel like now using Blender, like I don't know how many times I told myself that because like yeah, I wish I could bring back those objects
Mm,
into Blender. It's there's definitely something there.
this cough. And has there ever been any moments where you've been like, I guess, you've seen something beautiful, something awesome, but you haven't taken a picture because you just wanted to, I guess, absorb it, and or maybe even forgot to because you were just engrossed in, I guess, the awesomeness that's around you.
Yeah, yeah, it happens. Like sometimes you're like, it's pouring rain, and you're like, do I want to, you know, make all the efforts to like take the camera out, change the lens, and it takes a minute. You have to be careful and stuff, or you can just sit there and enjoy the view. So yeah, more than once. Or if anything, I just take my phone and shoot it with my phone
Mm.
just for myself, as a memory. But yeah, I don't always like put all the work needed to like shoot the view, because if it's too hard, then you just miss it.
And switching to, I guess, the course now, and even your, I know you mentioned already that it's something that's kind of like a work in progress, and you're not sure where it would end up as, but it's got a name now, Pupura Petriosa. Like, so if anyone doesn't know, with your course, visual storytelling, which is available right now, um, you create many images, but they're all part of one entire story. But as opposed to, although the images were specifically made for the course, they're also part of your own wider universe, which obviously has an amazing backstory, characters, there's lore, and all that kind of stuff. Um, like, you've touched upon it already in terms of how that kind of came about. But in some of the stuff you mentioned to me, there's obviously a lot of things that, and it's clearly with your experience in nature and photography, like there's a lot of philosophical things that you've put in there deliberately to flesh out the story as well. Like, although you're not sure in terms of, I guess, probably in terms of execution, how it's gonna end up, like maybe it's a film, maybe it's a book, or anything else. But is there any kind of like thing that's fueling that story, like maybe a moral or something that you're passionate about, that's really driving this, I guess, body of work?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to be, and I don't. I try to not think about it too much right now. I just want to tell the story. We'll see if it's under which form it's going to be,
Mhm.
and if I ever finish it, that's another subject. But yeah, I think I generally feel very concerned with the state of the world right now, like the direction we're going towards.
Mhm.
As far as I don't want to get too deep, but as far as climate change and the sixth mass extinction that's happening right now with the
Mhm.
biodiversity, and so I think that us as artists, we kind of have not an obligation, but I think it's nice. Like it's kind of our role to sort of imagine different futures and to
Mm.
maybe talk about it if we can and if we feel inspired by it. And so obviously the story of that project is not out yet, and I'm still working on it, but
Mhm.
it's very much tied to those subjects. And I guess I feel so frustrated with all those problems that it makes me feel better to use my art towards something like this, something that I think can raise people's minds.
Mm.
So yeah, that's definitely the fuel for it.
And I'm glad that that is something that you're doing, not only in terms of why you're doing it, but also in terms of just like the art of it as well. Like, it's, as someone who, and when you put a consumer hat on, you just want to see awesome things, but you also want to see things that kind of keep you coming back for more. And for me, this project is definitely something that makes me want to keep coming back for more. And
Right.
it also shows that, like, heavy topics, because this topic is a heavy topic. Obviously, it can be spoken about in throwaway terms. If you do want to delve deep into it, then you can go deep into it. But it's like, like with many other things, it's a heavy topic. But it also shows that just because it's a heavy topic doesn't mean it can't be spoken about in a way that's a positive way. And in this case, obviously, like, through visual storytelling, no pun intended. Um, but like, and it happens with films and books a lot, right? Like, you see certain films that have a certain plot, but obviously underneath it there's deeper philosophical things. Sometimes it's literal things, sometimes it's, like, to do with psychology and whatnot. And I think it's something that's happening more and more in our space where it's less about just something that's cool, and it's more about something that's obviously cool but has more meaning to it as well. Um, and like, just to switch to the course as well. Um, One thing I take away straight away is, firstly, when I check out a course, is selfish mode. Like, what can I use directly straight away that I can use in my projects, versus things that, okay, I need to develop that because this is far better than what I'm doing so far. And already I've taken a bunch of stuff. I've already used a bunch of stuff that you've taught in the course so far on my personal project. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome, man. Glad to hear.
but like, just before we touch upon the course or even go into the course in more detail, like, what would you love for students to take away? Is there any specific thing that you'd like to take away the most, or want to empower them on a specific aspect, with this course? Like, is it, yeah, what is it for you that you would love students to really gain from this body of work in this course?
Well, I really hope that that they can come up with original ideas and original stories. You know, I think I understand that sometimes, like when you really begin in the field, it's you kind of need to reproduce what you see. I mean, we've all done it, but I think also everyone has something to say, and so I hope it triggers uh, people's creativity, and I hope they can come up with like their own universe and their own little story. And I really can't wait to see what people are going to come up with because, like, I hope I know some things are going to look very similar to the course, but I also hope that some stuff are going to be like completely different.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I guess it's always natural. Like, let's say someone who's maybe just starting out or just like jumping into this specific realm or different space, that it's always going to be leaning close to more to what you see.
Of course, yeah,
Um, like, then obviously slowly, once like those layers shed and that workflow that you develop, which is a sick workflow, like, and that's all I gotta say to that in that sense. I will jump into it a little bit deeper, but like, first thing I straight away was like, okay, this way I'm working, I've kind of just thrown it in the bin. Because with the stuff that you've shown, it's like, yes, there's things that you could say maybe, just to summarize, it is a tip or a trick or a shortcut, but not in the way that's like, in a way that makes it cheap. It's almost just because this is the best way for me to get the solution, but everything's like, everything that you use is there because it has a reason. It's not done in a way like, basically it's like ninja stuff, like an assassin. It's like you come in, do the job, clean up, and then go home. But as a result, the extra energy, or sometimes where we can waste energy and time on, in terms of like, fiddling with a tool or tweaking something until we get it right, that's all put into what actually makes the image like that. The X factor that we always find in an image, like that, all that excess energy gets put into that. So I wanted to ask you directly, specifically on that. Is like, how long has it taken you to develop this workflow?
I don't know. I think it's always evolving, sort
Mm,
of. So I couldn't really put a finger on it, but because I think I've been working sort of like that for many years now. Like the thing that is kind of new is implementing 3D because I've only started to use Blender sort of recently. Like most of my work that I did at Circle Punch, like at least on the first game, like before the director's cut came out, it's all done in Photoshop. Like I didn't use
oh,
any
really?
3D almost. So yeah, so like it's all photo bashing, but like the way I'm using 3D, it's kind of like I'm making my own photos in 3D and then I
Yeah.
photo bash with the 3D almost. So it's sort of like the same workflow, but I just added another step. That is
Mm.
also like I have a lot of people asking me if it makes you save time. It doesn't. Just getting that out of the way. 3D doesn't make you save time, but it just I think it's a very cool tool because it makes you gain in quality, but it doesn't make you save time. But yeah, it's pretty much the same workflow I've been using for years, but it just evolves with like new tools and new techniques that I learn or that get out there. But like the doing a little sketch, doing like this kind of process that I do that I show in the course. I mean, I've been doing that since I don't know 2010. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's been a long time. Yeah.
Now, I mean, like, but even then, just to add that, add to that, it's like you're absolutely right. Like a workflow is always evolving.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the way you work, it sets you up to handle that evolution. So when things evolve, like you're always going to be like on the cusp or at the top of whatever is next to make sure that like basically and I've learned this the hard way. I've been burnt many times where a new tool comes out and I just get so distracted by it because it's so cool. It just ends up like using it as a toy as opposed to as a specific tool. Whereas everything that you showcase in the course is like there's something deliberate behind it, there's a purpose behind it, and it benefits obviously the project above all else.
Yeah.
And like even back to the sketching, like pencil and paper, like pen on paper. Same with myself when I was at uni. This was before 3D was a thing, and everything was not even digital art. It was just more like pen and paper and markers and all that kind of stuff. And that for me is still, just like you mentioned in the course yourself, is like that is still the best way to get ideas across, because pen and paper and just that I guess that physical connection and um seeing how the pen feels on the paper and stuff is it's there's just something cool about it. Maybe I think it does give you better ideas and stuff than doing on a tablet or Photoshop or something. But that's just probably my experience. But what I like is on this course you got literally from traditional through to digital, photo bashing, and obviously up to 3D and rendering and stuff, and all of that in between. It just shows that it's like you can kind of maybe swap each one out for something else, but the result's still going to be awesome.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I agree with you. Is like the feeling of like drawing just with a pen on paper. It's just it's unmatchable, I think, for me. But yeah, you're right about saying that I could basically switch any step of the process to something else. It would still be the same. Like I think I don't rely on a specific piece of software or like a specific technique for like the whole creative process.
Mhm.
So it might change again in the future. Who knows? But yeah, I don't like. I like the idea of not relying on something, and it's just like it's more about your ideas and the process rather than a software or a technique. Yeah.
And one thing I guess like we're all guilty of, maybe it's just the digital age and everything. When you see artwork on ArtStation or Instagram or wherever else, we just consume it within a matter of seconds. Obviously, the awesome stuff always catches your eye, and then we just move on to the next thing. And one thing with your work is, yes, it does catch your eye in an instant, and it's brilliant, whether it's professional or your personal stuff. But then when you start looking at it closely, and then even closer, then you realize whether it's the top right hand side or like the middle of the image or anywhere else, let alone whatever the focal point is, you can see there's like attention to detail. Like like obviously, basically being a bit like I don't think this is the case because you don't tweak every single pixel, but it's almost like every pixel gets the love and care that the main focal point does. So again, like that's something that, just speaking from my personal experience, is that is something that really frustrated me as an artist, where I'm thinking, why is the quality lacking? Like, why is it not everywhere? And not mean everywhere like in just like the literal sense, like pixel per pixel, but why doesn't it feel like the whole piece has got that full, I guess, attention and love that it needs? And one thing this course has shown me straight away, that okay, this is how to do it. But it's like I just want to congratulate you and applaud you for putting that extra, I guess, attention, and not like because I guess you could finish it maybe in a few steps earlier, but you put that extra, go that extra mile to make sure everything pops and looks clean, looks awesome. Um, like how long have you been doing that, or is that something that you've always done?
Well, thanks for the kind words, and yeah, I'm glad you are recognizing this because it's really something that I try to do. Like I'm conscious about it, going the extra mile. So I think I've been doing that for quite some time. Like, I mean, it's kind of like the kind of work I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also I like the idea of um, giving more into quality than quantity. So I
Mm.
think I always hear people like, "Oh, how fast do you work?" or "You work fast," or whatever. But I think actually good work takes time, and like good
Mm.
for any kind of work, right? Like good craftsmanship takes time. Like,
Mm.
and we should recognize that instead of always trying to go super fast. Like, and it applies for everything in our society, right? Where we tend to like you say, like consume things really fast, throw it away. I really don't like that kind of philosophy. I really
Mm.
like, like I really like to put time and love in something that I'm making. So I like, I have no problem spending days going into details. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at a bunch of paintings you have been doing fast, and like maybe two paintings that you really polished, something is gonna stay over the years and it's gonna stay in people's mind. And most of the time, it's gonna be something that you really took the time to finish. I mean, it's also like that you took time to plan.
Mm.
You took time during the process. You took time to finish it. Sometimes you think it's finished. You want to post it online, but like save it for a couple of days and look at it again a couple of days after, and maybe you'll find other things that you can improve. And I think it's something that I think it's important to go towards.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely going to be the trailer for the podcast because that's beautifully put. Um, and it's like, you know, with, I guess, just like putting the attention in and the extra level of detail. I think it's quite important that what you mentioned there in the fact that, what is the reason to do so? Like, because you want to put it online, which is fair enough, but what are you actually going to gain from there? Yes, you might get some followers, you might get some likes, and unless you have a huge following, it's not exactly going to lead to any money in that sense. So, you know, it does make you think that maybe it is just worth that extra time that you are going to save to post something, just put it back into the work, because that's only going to make you better and obviously separate you from the competition. Because with the tools and everything now, obviously there's a lot of stuff that can reach the same perhaps kind of look because of the tools and I guess how quickly they can make you do things. But like you mentioned, what you show in the course, when you teach in the course as well, that if you apply that and put your own craftsmanship is the perfect way to describe it. Because a true craft is somebody who puts that extra bit into it and to make sure that, before it leaves your hands, before you give it to the person who's intended for, that it's immaculate, right?
Yeah.
And that I guess would keep you, whether you're a freelancer, that will make sure that you get that repeat work because no one else kind of does that the same way you do. But also, it's only going to push you forward as I guess an artist.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there are other people. There are plenty of other people who kind of work in the same way that I do. But yeah, I think you do, like now, like the our industry becoming more and more open, and the software being easier and easier to learn. And there's also like so many great courses like on Learn Squared to pick from. Like you see a lot of people getting very good, right, and doing
Mm-hmm.
great work. But I think the thing that's lacking sometimes is like that extra little thing at the end that makes your work stand out. It's like I feel like I see a lot of really, I don't know how to explain that, but it's kind of like you see yeah, a lot of pretty work, but
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of, your eyes just kind of slide on it. It's
Right,
like,
right.
okay, it's well made, but it's like it doesn't really leaves a print, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's because people maybe do it on a like more like a I don't know how to explain this, but more like an industry, right? Where it's like more like a product. And what I
Yes,
try to
yes.
do is really trying to make art, really,
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm not interested in making products. Yeah, I guess I could put it like that. I'm really interested into making art and telling stories.
And one of the, I guess, weapon you use to do that is the actual storytelling element of it as well.
Right.
Because it's like say for myself, I tend to specialize in vehicles and stuff, but it tends to just be the vehicle itself. Um, if I do put it in a scene, it's just that scene's a background, but it's still about the vehicle. Yet, take how you would do it. It's not just only that. There's obviously in this course the images you've made. there's a character, there is a vehicle, or I guess they're whatever they use to go along in their journey, and there's the world and all that kind of stuff, and everything from the environment, what's in the environment, from the type of vegetation and the structures and everything in there, to obviously the vehicle itself and how it's looked and what it's been through. That just visually you can tell that, that's been through something, or that's been on a bit of a ride, a bumpy ride. And then obviously the character itself, in terms of like the what they're wearing and the
Mhm.
choices and all that kind of stuff, like that for me was just expertly done. And the way you teach that as well, how to like deploy storytelling visually is not only well done in the visual sense, but also well taught as an instructor as well. Um, and is that like something that's very important for you to include in your images? Is that part of the extra mile as well, like making sure
Yeah.
that the story is baked into the actual pixels itself?
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes going the extra mile, it's not just like polishing for an extra mile. It's also like more planning and then thinking ahead a little more. And it's funny because I've never considered myself a designer, and I guess I've been told many times that I wasn't. But like I always felt more like a storyteller. But I think that design fits so much in storytelling that
Mm.
even though I'm definitely not a designer, like I couldn't design like ships like you do, for example. It's just like I don't. It's an exercise that I don't really know how to do. But because I feed so much into the stories, I tell myself that it kind of creates designs. Like I don't know.
Mm.
It's like if you look at what I do, it's not overly designed, but I think I try at least to make it believable because my stories are articulated in my head.
I mean, even like say the design aspect, like I totally get where you're coming from in that aspect, but at least the like for example a vehicle or anything, like it's all about the silhouette, right? Like the silhouette you do, the vehicle you've used in this specific course, that is super original and super recognizable straight away. And obviously take other ones in other stories, like the X-wing or the Millennium Falcon or basically anything in Star Wars, like already straight away it's like recognizable, and you see what is linked to the character as well. So yeah, no, I think that's not only deployed perfectly in terms of someone who's visually looking at it, because sometimes people don't know, the viewer just don't know why they think something's awesome. But as like
Yeah.
say for artists who are learning, like not only do you see that, but you also get taught how to do that as well. And like yourself, like obviously we spoke about this before the course launched, like we're just super excited to see what people create, and there's already some cool stuff coming out. And because on one hand, obviously you get to see like how people are adapting what you've taught and how they're using it as well, like how they're growing and improving. But then the story element, like getting to see what's inside people's heads, those awesome, worlds and stories and adventures and all that kind of stuff, like seeing how that comes to fruition as well. That's equally exciting for me. I'm sure, I guess, for yourself as well.
Yeah, that's right. I really hope the course is gonna give confidence to people to like create their own thing. I think like all the technical bits and tips that I give through the course. I think most of it you can get it from other courses. I think like most of the knowledge is already out there. I mean, I got it from somewhere, obviously, but I think yeah, I really try to emphasize the whole creative process. I think it's more. I mean, from my course, it's the most valuable part. So yeah, I really hope that's what people get out of it.
It's 100% sure they will, and like it's super dope. And just one point I want to ask you before we wrap up,
Mhm.
is you mentioned obviously about tools and softwares and everything. Is there anything that's on the horizon for you next that you'd like to learn and adopt? Like, is anything catching your eye?
Yeah, I want to go back to traditional.
Sick.
I really want to uh, get more into sketching and yeah, on paper. There's also maybe another thing that is in between that I would like to spend more time in is Procreate on
Mm.
iPad. I've seen people doing amazing things with it, and it's not traditional, but I feel like it's a step towards that. maybe a step away from Photoshop and towards that. I love Photoshop, but I want to try Procreate as well. And yeah, just like doing more sketching and even, I don't know, watercolor. I don't know. I want to get back to that a little more.
No, but that's still like, for me, that's always like as good as we can be digitally. And obviously, there's a lot of skill to make
Yeah.
that stuff awesome. But the traditional stuff, that there's always something. There's always, even if you never show it to anybody, there's just something like awesome in that journey of just creating something with traditional medium. It's just
Yeah.
it's more than just art in my sense, and I'm sure the same for you as well.
Yeah. I love it. And yeah, it's very, very valuable, I think.
Dude, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for dropping all that wisdom. I could talk to you for hours, but we have to get on with our days. If anybody is considering getting the course, at this moment in time, the course is 40% off for our early bird discount. So take advantage of that because this is a gem of a course. Any final words from yourself to your students?
I don't know. I hope everyone has fun. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to do that with you guys, because I also got to learn a lot doing the course. So even though it was a lot of work, it was 100% worth it. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone has fun.
A massive thanks to Romain for sharing his insights today. His course, Visual Storytelling, is out now, and the first lesson is free. If you're listening at the time this episode airs, then please enjoy your 40% off early bird discount, which runs through November. Hit the links in this episode's description to sign up, and also to follow and check out what Romain has been up to. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.